So you've probably seen me build some pretty wild stuff on my channel, from giant Nerf guns to squirrel obstacle courses. But today, we're diving into something a bit different, but just as important: survival. Now, when you think of survival gear, you're probably picturing knives, fire starters, and maybe a good water filter. All crucial stuff. But what if I told you that one of the most powerful survival tools you could have fits in the palm of your hand, costs less than a fancy dinner, and runs on less power than your phone charger? This is the Raspberry Pi, a tiny credit card-sized computer, and it's a game changer for anyone serious about being prepared in a world where the power grid could go down, or communication networks could fail. You know, a classic SHTF, or shit hits the fan scenario. Having a plan B is critical, and that's where this little guy shines. We're not just talking about playing old school video games on it. We're talking about solving real-world survival problems. How do you talk to your family when the cell towers are down? How do you know if a storm is coming without the Weather Channel? How do you secure your camp from intruders at night? The Raspberry Pi can be the brain behind the solution to all of these challenges. Today, we're going to break down 7 practical, life-saving uses for a Raspberry Pi in a survival situation. We'll go from a simple concept to a working prototype, showing you exactly how this tiny piece of tech can become the central hub of your preparedness strategy. We'll cover everything from communication and security to managing your precious resources like power and information. So grab your thinking caps, because we're about to turn this humble little computer into the ultimate survival gadget. Let's get started. All right, first up, communication. When disaster strikes, the first thing to go is usually our ability to talk to each other. Cell towers get overloaded or damaged, and suddenly your smartphone is just a fancy paperweight. This is a huge problem. How do you coordinate with your family or group? How do you call for help? Well, with a Raspberry Pi, we can build our own private off-grid communication network. We're not hacking into satellites here. We're using something called LoRa, which stands for Long Range Radio. These little modules connect to the Pi and let you send text messages over miles, completely independent of any cell service or internet. It's like creating your own personal, encrypted walkie-talkie network, but for data. Imagine this. You have a Pi set up at your home base, and your family members each have a small portable LoRa device. You can send status updates, coordinates, or emergency alerts directly to each other. We're going to use special software that turns our Pi into a messaging hub. For the more advanced folks, you can even set up what's called an AREDN, or Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network. This creates a mesh network over amateur radio frequencies, allowing you to share files, use chat rooms, and even make video calls, all without a single bar of cell service. It's about taking back control of your ability to communicate when you need it most. Okay? Next problem. The weather. In a survival scenario, knowing what the weather is doing isn't just a convenience. It's critical for safety and planning. Is that a simple rainstorm, or is it a hurricane-level event with a massive drop in barometric pressure? Without the internet or TV, you're flying blind. So for our second project, we're turning the Raspberry Pi into a hyper-localized, off-grid weather station. And we do this by connecting a set of simple, inexpensive sensors to the Pi's GPIO pins. Talking about sensors that can measure temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and even wind speed and direction. It's like a full-on weather command center, powered by our tiny computer. Once the sensors are hooked up, we install some amazing open source software like WeWX. This software doesn't just read the data, it logs it, analyzes it, and displays it in easy-to-read graphs and charts. You can see trends over time, which is the key to forecasting. A rapid drop in pressure, a big storm is likely on its way, a sudden shift in wind direction, that could signal a change in the weather front. This isn't just a thermometer, it's a powerful analytical tool that gives you the data you need to make informed decisions like when to hunker down, when to travel, or when to prepare your shelter for incoming conditions. When things go sideways, information is just as valuable as food or water. Think about it. Do you have all your important documents backed up? What about maps of your area, survival manuals, first aid guides, or a list of your emergency supplies? Sure, you could print out thousands of pages, but that's heavy, bulky, and vulnerable to getting wet or destroyed. Here's a much smarter solution. We're turning the Raspberry Pi into a digital survival archive, a Fort Knox for your critical data. The Pi can run for ages on a small battery pack and connect to a tiny screen, giving you access to a massive library of information, anywhere, anytime. All you need is the Pi and a large capacity micro SD card or a USB flash drive. On this, you can store everything. I'm talking about scanned copies of your passports and birth certificates, encrypted of course. You can download detailed topographical maps of your entire region, so you'll never be lost, even without GPS. Download entire survival wikis, medical encyclopedias, and guides on plant identification or water purification. It becomes your single source of truth, a digital library that doesn't rely on the internet. You can even set up a simple database to inventory your food supplies, tracking what you have and what you need. It's about being prepared with knowledge. In any long-term off-grid scenario, power is life, whether you're running on a solar generator, a car battery, or even a hand-cranked dynamo. Every single watt is precious. You really can't afford to waste it. But how do you know how much power your devices are actually using? And how can you tell if your solar panels are charging your batteries effectively? Guessing is honestly a recipe for disaster, leaving you in the dark at the worst possible moment. This is where our Raspberry Pi becomes an indispensable energy monitoring system. By adding a few current sensors, we can get a real-time, data-driven look at our entire power setup. We'll use an amazing open source project called Open Energy Monitor. We hook up non-invasive current sensors. They just clip around the power cables, so no risky rewiring is needed, and they feed data directly to the Pi. The software then visualizes this information beautifully. You can see exactly how much power your lights, radio, or water pump are drawing at any given moment. You can track how much energy your solar panels are generating versus how much you're consuming. This allows you to create a power budget, identify energy hogging devices, and make smart decisions to ensure your batteries last as long as possible. It's kind of like having a fuel gauge for your entire off-grid life. When the world gets chaotic, security becomes a top priority. Protecting your family, your supplies, and your shelter is honestly non-negotiable. But you just can't stay awake all the time. watching every angle of your perimeter, right? That's a job for technology. With a Raspberry Pi and a couple of cheap cameras, we can build a sophisticated, low-power surveillance system that acts as your tireless digital watchdog. And we're not talking about some fancy cloud-based system that stops working when the internet goes down. We're building a completely self-contained, localized security network that you control entirely. The magic here is a piece of software called MotionEye OS. You flash it onto the Pi's micro SD card, plug in one or more USB or Pi compatible cameras, and well, that's it. It turns the Raspberry Pi into a dedicated motion detection hub. You can configure it to start recording video only when it detects movement in specific zones, which saves a ton of storage space and power. It can send you an alert, not to your phone, but maybe by flashing an LED or sounding a small buzzer connected to the Pi's pins. You can even set up night vision cameras for round-the-clock coverage, giving you eyes in the dark and an early warning system against any potential threats. We've talked about sending simple messages with LoRa, but what if you need more robust connectivity for your group? What if you need to share files, coordinate on a digital map, or have a shared workspace, but there's no Wi-Fi, no router, and no internet? The solution is to create our own local network, and the Raspberry Pi is, honestly, the perfect tool for the job. We're going to set up something called a wireless mesh network. Unlike a traditional network where everyone connects to a central router, in a mesh network, every device connects to every other device it can see. This creates a resilient, self-healing web of connectivity. Each Raspberry Pi in the network acts as a node or a relay point. If one Pi goes down or out of range, the network automatically reroutes the data through other available nodes. It's incredibly robust. We can use software like Batman ADV or LibreMesh to configure the Pis to act as these mesh nodes. Suddenly, your whole group, spread out over a campsite or even a neighborhood, can connect their laptops or phones to this local network. You can share files, use chat applications that work locally, and collaborate without ever touching the public internet. It's like having your own private, portable internet bubble just for your team. One of the biggest threats in a long-term grid-down situation is the loss of access to information. The internet is the largest library in human history, but what happens when you can't get to it? How do you look up how to perform a specific first aid procedure? Fix a piece of equipment? Or identify an edible plant? For our final project, we're turning the Raspberry Pi into a pocket-sized server that hosts massive amounts of offline content. It's like having Wikipedia, medical textbooks, and countless how-to guides available at your fingertips, no internet required. The key to this is an incredible piece of software called Kiwix. Kiwix allows you to download compressed offline versions of massive websites. We're talking the entirety of Wikipedia, Project Gutenberg's library of books, medical resources like the Merck Manual, and so much more. You load these giant files onto a hard drive connected to your Pi. The Pi then runs a small web server, broadcasting its own Wi-Fi hotspot. Anyone nearby can connect to the Pi's Wi-Fi with their phone or laptop, open a web browser, and access all of this content as if they were online. It's a self-contained, searchable fountain of knowledge that could literally be a lifesaver. So there you have it. 7 ways this tiny, unassuming computer can be transformed from a hobbyist toy into a powerful tool for survival. We've seen how the Raspberry Pi can solve some of the most critical challenges in an SHTF scenario, establishing communication, predicting the weather, securing your data, managing power, monitoring your perimeter, creating a local network, and serving up a library of life-saving knowledge. The sheer flexibility of this device is what makes it so valuable. It's not a single-purpose tool. It's a digital multi-tool that can adapt to whatever problem you need to solve, all while sipping power from a small battery pack. The key, however, is not to wait until an emergency happens to figure all this out. The time to learn, to experiment, and to build these systems is now, while things are calm and you have access to all the resources you need. Get a Raspberry Pi. Pick one of these projects that seems most useful to you and just start tinkering. The skills you build today are the assets that will keep you safe tomorrow. You'll not only end up with some incredibly useful survival gadgets, but you'll also gain the confidence and knowledge that comes from being a creator, not just a consumer of technology. Being prepared is about having options when others have none. The Raspberry Pi gives you a whole new set of options that most people would never even consider. It's the intersection of tech savvy and self-reliance, and it can give you a significant edge when it matters most. So my challenge to you is this: don't wait until disaster strikes. Turn your Raspberry Pi into a survival powerhouse today. Thanks for watching and stay prepared.